Today we're going to be talking about The Watchers, which has definitely been one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Now, this is directed by Ishana Shyamalan. Yes, she is a Shyamalan. And I believe her dad, M. Night Shyamalan, was a producer on this, or he helped her in some way. And this is a case where I feel like I'm okay with nepotism. You know, I love M. Night and how he funds his own movies, and he doesn't really care what everyone else is doing in Hollywood, and he doesn't do anything to really appease studios, at least not anymore. I feel like there was a period of time where he did. But, you know, he just does his own thing, and he does it for the passion of filmmaking. So if he instills that into Ishana, I'm okay with some nepotism. Now, The Watchers is based on a book by A.M. Shine, which I did actually read before watching this movie. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a comparison and a little bit of a book discussion, especially in spoilers. I am going to be doing spoilers for this movie, just to talk a little bit about the ending and things that were changed from the book. The Watchers follows a 28-year-old artist who gets stranded in an expansive, untouched forest in Western Ireland. Finding shelter, she unknowingly becomes trapped alongside three strangers who are stalked by mysterious creatures every night. So this also stars Dakota Fanning and Georgina Campbell, and those are the bigger names. This also stars Olwen, I'm gonna butcher her name, I'm sorry, Follier. I remember her most from her recent stint in a Texas Chainsaw installment. If you know, you know. And this does have a PG-13 rating, and honestly, I would feel like this movie is actually really good for beginners into horror because it's not that scary. I mean, there were definitely moments, and we'll talk about creature design and everything like that, and visually what we see, the effects. Why do we have to be the loudest car on the street? But I feel bad saying this, but the movie was okay. It was just okay. The book was fine. Everything was fine. And I don't feel passionate about it in any way, shape, or form, in any direction, negatively or positively. There's no passion here, except for the fact that it's done by a Shyamalan, and I was excited for it. And I feel like that anticipation also kind of ruined the experience a little bit because I was anticipating it so much. And sometimes that's just not a good thing because then you have high expectations and they don't live up to your expectations. And I was really hoping the movie was going to be better than the book. The book was fine. It was fine. I think mostly what I enjoy is the concept of this story of these watchers in the forest, and you slowly find out what they actually are. Are they aliens? What are they, right? My first thought was they were aliens when I saw the trailer. And I liked that journey, and I liked the setting, obviously, taking place in the woods, and those are my favorite aspects of this concept. However, I don't feel like the book nor the movie really executed, neither of them really executed it properly, in my opinion. For how much potential this concept had, I don't think either of them really handled it that well. So let's talk about what I liked about the movie. Not talking about the book, we're just gonna talk about the movie for a second because I want to fairly critique the movie and review the movie, book aside. I do wish the creatures were a little bit more mysterious overall, but I really enjoyed the creature design in this. You could tell CG. It was a lot of CG going on, and it kind of felt old, old CG, Mama back in that day of 2012, 2013 CG almost. That might be really weird to say, but just something about the creature design felt old. Something that would have been done a decade ago, which isn't a bad thing. That's not a bad era of horror by any means, but it felt a little dated, and I don't think this movie's going to age well because of that. And I do think, we see them. We see the creatures, and I wish they were a little bit more mysterious. Let's keep it a little bit of mystery in there, and we don't need to see them so much. But I liked them. I liked them, and I liked the concept. So that's number one, my favorite thing that stood out from this movie. The atmosphere, obviously, I really enjoyed, and there was some decent tension in it. I feel like Ishana did well with what she was working with the story and, the script that she was given or that she took on. I feel like she did a good job, and I could see the talent there because this was a very well-directed movie. I thought the performances were really good. There are some things missing in character development, but the performances in general with what they were given and what they're working with the story and everything, just, the original book from A.M. Shine, but also the screenwriter, whoever wrote the script for this, whatever they were working with, they did a good job, I think. It wasn't phenomenal. was not fantastic by any means, but it was fine. Like I said, this movie's fine. It still actually managed to shock me a little bit. There was like a scene where it took me by surprise because they changed something from the book and I wasn't expecting it, which is good. I like when a movie will do that, when they change enough things where it can still shock the viewer despite knowing the story and like reading the book beforehand. And I do want to encourage people to see this in theaters simply to support Ishana, and again, that's my bias coming through. Does this need a theater viewing? Definitely not. I feel like this is going to be completely fine to watch at home because it's just an okay movie. It's fine. And I feel like this is the movie in general of potential. Like the story had potential, the creatures had potential, the director has potential, and none of it really was up to expectation. And that's okay. It's okay. It's her first movie, right? But I will be watching what she does in the future and what other stories she takes on, if she's going to continue to follow in her dad's footsteps and do these like horror thrillers, you know, PG-13 twisty thrillers, or if she's gonna branch off and do something else. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about what I didn't like about this movie, because there's a lot of things that I didn't like. Number one, cheesy jump scares. I know. I was so taken aback that there were these kind of jump scares in this movie. I'm not gonna lie. I was insulted a little bit. I was like, what are we doing? Classic bird jump scare. I hate when modern movies do a bird jump scare, and I'm going to be doing a whole video. If you guys saw Spooky Astronauts did a video, Emma over at Spooky Astronauts, she did a video on her horror movie icks. I'm going to be doing the same thing and talking about my icks, and one of them is bird jump scares. Why are we still doing them? Why are we still doing them in 2024? There is no need for a jump scare involving a bird. Anyway, there's a tonal shift in the last act, and if you've read the book and you watch the movie, you're also going to be really thrown off by what is happening, and like the length of time of things that occur. I'm trying not to say spoilers yet, but I will talk about it in spoilers and like clarify what I'm talking about. But it's very interesting, the shift that happens in the last act. And I don't feel like they pulled off the ending very well with what happens in the book and with the movie. I feel like it didn't translate well, and they changed some things. They changed some things. I felt like they rushed through it because in the book there was a lot more time to like delve into things and like spend time doing a scene and whatnot. And in the movie, they just rushed right through that. And they rushed way too fast through the ending and didn't give us enough time, I think, to digest what's happening. I feel like the end of the book was a lot more ominous and haunting. Like the images that I saw in my head when I read the end of that book were horrifying, and I was so excited when I finished to see that come to life. I don't love the book, but there was some really haunting visuals that were described in the book, and I was excited to see that, and it did not translate. Again, that's one of the things when you read a book and you have a vision in your head and then you watch the movie adaptation and it does not match those visuals, it can be a little bit disappointing. So that's my bad for doing that. And in the movie, I feel like we're lacking a lot of character development and we don't actually care that much. I feel like there's some backstory there, but it almost felt like shoehorned into the story instead of feeling a little bit more natural, because obviously in a book, it's a lot easier to have internal monologues, internal dialogues and everything, reflection and flashbacks in a book. It's easier to do that than in a movie. So I feel like the movie didn't really handle the backstory well, and like, I don't know, the character development. We needed more of it. And the character changes of Daniel and Kiara, or Sierra, I read it as Sierra in the book, but in the movie they say Kiara, I believe. Anyway, those two characters were lacking a lot of depth in the movie, because in the book they had a lot more to them. They were obviously bigger parts. They even had their own chapters. And in the movie they didn't have a lot of time to really delve into their backstories and like their character development, and that was really missing for me. Like, I wish we got more of that. Like I said, it felt really rushed through. I feel like they didn't focus on the right things in the story. Overall, just felt kind of bland. The book is kind of bland. There's some good, descriptions in there, but I feel very meh about all of it. I gave the book 3 stars on Goodreads, and I give the movie 3 stars, 3 out of 5. It's just fine. It's fine. Like, I'd rewatch it, but it didn't live up to what I thought it was going to be. Also, the book, I want to talk about the book for just a second. Obviously, this has a little bit of book discussion. If you don't care, you can skip ahead to spoilers because those are coming next. But the book, the descriptions are a little bit superfluous, I would say, and the writing in general feels a little extra. And it kind of reminds me of my writing in a way, which sounds super like, ooh, I'm such a good writer because, you know, it's a published novel. I've never been published. It's like my writing. It's not. It's just, I'm looking at it as if it's like my flaws that I also do in my writing, which is like over-explaining some things and like focusing too close. You're like too close to the story and you're like over-explaining things that don't need to really be explained. And also it feels a little thesaurus-y, you know what I mean? I actually screenshot part of the book to read to you, and I don't think it would be considered a spoiler. You know, if you want to skip ahead and you don't want to hear any part of the book because you don't want to hear any part of the story, you just want to go in with no information, then skip on forward, or actually stop watching the video because I'm going to talk about spoilers next. But this is just an example of some of the writing that was in the book that felt a little superfluous to me and a little bit too extra. I actually have two examples of this. Like actors waiting off stage for their mark, the city strollers returned when the clouds spread apart in long, loosely knitted sheets. Ruts of rainwater glistened between the cobbles, snaring the sunlight and blinding those walking west. Honestly, that sounds pretty good when you read it out loud, but it just felt a little bit too complicated for what we're actually experiencing within the scene. This is the one where I'm like, where are we coming up with these words? And why are there so many words? Maybe I have low IQ. I don't really know, but I just feel like we don't need these like big word, you know, fancy words, especially when it's not throughout the entire novel. Like, it'd be one thing if it was always like this, but there were just some things, some words that were just like sprinkled in there. I was like, The android's face evinced the same qualities, the intensity of the eyes, those inert features so dispassionate that they insinuated no definable emotion. Again, it doesn't sound as bad when I read it out loud. And maybe it's just because I don't use those words, but that's just a little example of like, sometimes the writing was a lot. I will also say that before we get into spoilers, the book and movie both have some plot hole issues, and like, obviously you have to have a lot of suspension of disbelief when it comes to this story. So if that's something you struggle with, then this isn't going to be the story for you, but I found that to be the case in both the book and the movie. Okay, so let's talk about spoilers. Very severe spoilers coming up, so make sure if you are interested in this movie at all, or the book, do not watch the rest of this video. So Ishana is a Shyamalan after all, so naturally she took on a project with a major twist in it. I didn't want to say that there was a twist in this before I talked about spoilers, because sometimes just mentioning that there's a twist will cause some people to speculate throughout the movie, and like, you know, they're like expecting this huge thing, so sometimes it's fun to go in without knowing that it's actually going to be a twist. Twist in the book blew me away. Genuinely did not see it coming, which is very impressive. The movie changed up the twist a little bit, and I didn't like it at all. So let me tell you what the twist is. Again, if you haven't seen it, this is your last warning. This is the major twist in the movie. Madeline, who is the older woman with the white hair in the coop, which is what they call that building that keeps them safe in the woods at night from the Watchers. She's actually one of them. She's a Watcher. And in the book, it's described, they don't really go too much into depth about her lore, but they say that she's like evolved a little bit so she can actually withstand the sun. But there are little hints in the book that she is in fact a Watcher. In the movie, they don't really give you a lot of that, which I wish they put in a little bit more sprinkles in there, because I was looking for it. I was like, are they gonna make it obvious ever? But they don't, because in the movie, they actually make her a halfling. So she's half Watcher, half human, because the Watchers are fairies. I know. That's just a term for them. They're not necessarily like the standard fairy, but in like folklore, this is actually a folklore kind of movie. And in the lore, when fairies roamed the earth and coexisted with humans, sometimes they fell in love and had babies. And Madeline is one of them. So she can withstand the sun and like be out in the light, but also she can transform. So you might be asking, why does she look like that? Well, the scientist or the historian, captain. I don't really know what you would call him. They call him the professor in the movie. He created this bunker to study the Watchers. And that's a whole like backstory there. That's kind of a plot dump in both the book and the movie. The movie does it a little bit worse with the plot dump. He created this, and in the movie he catches a Watcher and trains it, I guess. And basically he had a Watcher study photos and videos of his late wife. And so Madeline is, you know, a Watcher who is imitating the professor's wife. So that's why she looks like that. She is identical to his late wife who had died, and he thought, why don't I use the Watchers to my advantage and have them bring my wife back to life, basically. In the movie, I didn't really care about her lore or like the plot dump of like the library. There's like this library scene naturally with the library research and all that about the fairy lore, and I didn't care about it in the movie. I cared more in the book because, again, we have a lot more character development. We know about Madeline a little bit more. And then the reveal is like way bigger it's big in both, I would say. But I was surprised with the fact that she was a halfling in the movie. That was not in the book. So that's one of the things that surprised me. Also, the other thing that caught me off guard was when Mina visits Kiara's home after they escape. They escape, by the way. We're gonna get to that. They escape the forest and like the timeline of that because it's very different from the book. She goes to Kiara's house to warn her like, hey, Mina's actually a Watcher. She's one of them. And she's talking to Kiara, and then soon she sees Kiara come home outside, and oh, that's actually Madeline who is imitating Kiara. And I didn't like the jumping around. I didn't like this in the book either of like, oh, I'm gonna kill you, or I'm gonna hurt you, I'm coming back for you. In the book, Madeline literally says, I don't want to be you. I'm not trying to be you. And in the movie, she says, I want to be you. So that's a disconnect for me. And she goes from like wanting to kill them or hurt them to like being talked down, and you know, Mina's like, we promise we won't say anything, and Madeline's like, you promise? And then she flies away. She flies. In the movie, she bursts out some wings and flies away. That was not in the book. I don't like the wings. I don't like the wings. But in the book, the ending is so chilling. There's this hallway scene where Mina is like talking to Madeline, and she's shape-shifting in the hallway. She's going to her original form, which is very tall, lanky, and lean, and very skinny. Love that creature design, by the way. And then she'll like shift a little bit to look like Mina. And it's very creepy in my head, the way I'm seeing it, because there's hardly any light, so you can't really see her clearly. And that just seems very haunting and ominous to me, and that didn't translate into the movie. They didn't really do that in the movie. So when they escape, the point in the book in which they escape, they run to the boat and they leave, is the halfway point in the book. And we got so far into the movie before they escaped, I was like, are they going to do is there going to be a part 2? Because there's a whole lot of other stuff we got to get through. Mina has to go to the professor's office and destroy all of the maps. She has to discover that Madeline is actually, you know, mimicking his late wife. We have to go to Kiara's house. There's even more to that as well. You know, Mina goes home. She's like trying to figure out her life situation. The bird was also a bigger part in the book. So when it kept going and they hadn't escaped yet, I was literally thinking they're going to do a sequel, aren't they? But no, they just rushed through the last act and just did the big reveal that Madeline is actually a Watcher and blah, blah, blah. So I feel like there's a lot of focus on the time that they spend in the woods, in the coop, which that's, you know, my favorite part of the book is that time they spend there. And also the reveal of the professor's den under the coop. I didn't really like how they did that in the movie. In the book, for some reason, one of the plot holes is like, how could you not have seen that beforehand? But in the book, it kind of made more sense in my head why they wouldn't have seen the big hole in the ground that they needed to bust through. But in the movie, it was literally just like a rug was thrown over the door. And it's like, why would you never have seen that? Like, you would have at some point. Anyway, I'm just kind of rambling now, but that's what I mean by there wasn't a lot of character development in the movie because they didn't spend the time to do that, and they just rushed through a lot of the story. So, like I said, it was fine. It was fine. Everything was fine. I don't feel passionately about it. it was fine. Go see it, I guess, if you want to support Ishana. Otherwise, you could wait for streaming, to be honest. It's just okay, and I'm really bummed about that because I was so excited for this movie. I'm also really bummed the book was not great. The book was better, though. I gotta say that. So let me know, have you seen The Watchers yet? What are your thoughts on it? And are you excited for future Ishana Shyamalan projects? Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.